All righty, welcome everybody to another episode of The Break Room. My name is Eric Mayhall, and today we have Brian Wink and Trace Thomas joining us. We're going to be jumping in and discussing some interesting research that just became available from Pew, kind of the research OGs of the ad industry, if you will. And they publish an annual report that kind of shows media trends as well as advertising trends within traditional media. And that just dropped. And there are some interesting takeaways. You all agree?
I would say one or two good things came out of this if you can count Pew as credible. It might be disinformation. I'm not sure.
Yeah, right. At this point, who's really safe? Who's really
Right.
who's really reliable?
I definitely
Very
thought there
cool.
were some interesting points made by it, and that I mean we'll get into all of it, but like I thought all the radio stuff was interesting, like it all moving into the digital spaces it have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to kind of start off, from the top of the list down, one of the interesting points is kind of how newspapers, for the first time, now made more money from their circulation revenue than they did their advertising revenue. So we know and we've seen obviously newspaper and print media kind of slowly dying off in favor of taking digital space as a primary focus for most companies. And that's forced newspapers to kind of react and start to use some sort of subscription model even for digital ads, if for digital users. So if you want to go read the Washington Post now, you've probably seen that you need to pay $1 for any of their articles. So it's interesting to see that for the first time ever that advertising money is down in the newspaper industry to such a degree that even circulation revenue is increased past it.
Well, but I mean, none of that's new to us, right? This is all
Mm-hmm.
something we've been talking about for years, that this is the trend that's happening. What we're seeing right now is we're actually seeing the research catch up to what we already knew and what we'd already been advising. And, it's putting things in place that are a little bit more concrete and a little bit more factual than just some advertising guy going, the viewership of newspapers is down. Well, yeah, obviously, but this is just kind of putting some facts in place that allow people to really latch onto it and go, oh, okay, yeah, that's right.
Well, and another interesting thing that they don't really talk about in the article we were kind of looking at was that is how many writers are now just taking it into their own hand. Like now Substack is a thing, and you have all that where now like writers are just like, well, hey, everything's subscription based anyways. I might as well just start my own subscription. So I know like Mark Stein, was a writer for the New York Times, right, covering sports, and now if you want to read his stuff, you got to go to a Substack. So he's getting that revenue directly to him compared to people needing to subscribe to New York Times to read it. So
So
That's a good point. I read, yeah, Heather Richardson's Cox and Seth Abrams are both two ex New York Times writers who I think still might write editorials from every now and then, but they've moved all of their news reporting over to Substack too, which is interesting. So that's a good point that most people probably didn't consider, is just the changing world of journalism and kind of that impact on advertising is pretty interesting.
Substack, what is my age is showing here? What is that? It sounds like a sandwich from Subway.
Basically a
Like
free
turkey,
blog.
ham, roast beef, pastrami, all stacked on one big Subway sandwich.
Yeah, right. It sounds like an Arby's sandwich if you're layering that many kinds of meat on top of each other.
Yeah.
It's just like a WordPress alternative almost, a good site for blogging that allows people to subscribe on a payment model too.
Huh.
Yeah, and a lot of different writers are going that avenue, which can be good or bad depending on how you view gatekeepers, in the industry. Who's editing this stuff now and everything like that. But I mean, some people, it just depends on your take on it. Some people never liked the gatekeepers to begin with. So,
well, but see, this really opens itself up to a completely different type of podcast, which is, is it credible? I mean, people are putting their opinions out there without any type of accountability for fact checking or any of those things. So at some point you can go to Substack and you can put your own content out there. I mean, I can tweet something out right now and, people are going to look at it and go, okay, is it logistics, or is it realistic, or is this something that is full of just opinion-based stuff, which is something that we really see in these analytics that Pew put out, is when you really break these down, and this is looking at this research is something that I've been doing for, like 20 years. And so it's looking at the research is one thing, but reading into it and understanding it is another. My job when I was at the TV stations was when the Nielsen books came out about 4 times a year. My job was to go in and take the Nielsen books and find the stories in which we could take out to people and sell. Where did we beat the other networks? Where were our strongest moments? What can I manipulate the numbers inside the ratings to make us look even better? So, that's, you learn a lot of what these ratings are actually telling you when you're doing stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, it is. You bring up a good point where we're seeing journalism start to take kind of a big freelance turn, which does lower accountability. And, it's something that we've seen on a global scale with reporters like Bellingcat starting to do a little more reporting together that isn't necessarily through a specific publication, as much as this research is being done to kind of increase public knowledge about certain things that, the New York Times or similar outlets might not even want to cover, because the nature of it might kind of conflict with what narratives they're trying to put on or what kind of information they're getting from their sources. So it's interesting from that perspective of things, which kind of leads into one of the next major points on that Pew scale, which is we saw cable news explode the last year, which is pretty expected considering the tumultuous last 12 months we've gone through politically, economically, and climate wise. So a lot of news to report on, but it seems like more and more people are turning to cable news outlets such as Fox and CNN to get their information, because they saw huge boosts in viewership and ad revenue.
Well, and also, so many people are at home.
Good point.
So, a lot of people are sitting at home and they, put the news on in the background. So while there was a lot going on, there was also, a lot of people able to watch what was going on compared to, maybe in the past few years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There were a lot of anomalies, and that's one of the things that you really got to take into consideration with the numbers that are coming out right now. Is you had a campaign, you had an election year, and then you had a political unrest with a attempted insurrection, or no, I guess it wasn't attempted. There was an insurrection. And then you had a global pandemic in which people are trying to understand and figure out for their own health and safety what's going on. Then you have people locked down. States and communities are shut up and shut down and into, stay at home quarantining and all that stuff. And even today with the rise of the Delta variant and everything else, you have people quarantining days at a time. So it absolutely skews everything. So to an extent, you got to look at this and really go, yeah, maybe. I can see where some of this is coming in play, because it is in trend with what we already know, and from the other side of everything, the context of it all is still there, but maybe the jumps aren't as drastic as they seem when these numbers first initially come out.
That's interesting, and it kind of brings us to the bigger conversation of the topic, which is, what will be the new normal, even as things kind of start to return to a little more relative normalcy, pending any kind of spikes in infection and variants and stuff. We're overall kind of skewing in a direction where things will start to see things a little more normal than we've seen in the past few years. And the question is will things change? Will the way people absorb information when there isn't as much breaking news about kind of like really intense events, will it change how they digest their info? I know a lot of people said, in the first couple of months of Biden's presidency, it's like, wow, the news has gotten really boring. I think we discussed it too, that even, us two, at least Brian and I don't know about you, Trace, but we're kind of political junkies and staying updated with things. And, we were talking that, what, man, we've been reading less too, because there's just been less crazy headlines. And obviously that's changed in the last few months. There's been a lot of things to pop up for that administration, but still it's interesting to see how that ebb and flow will change how people choose to absorb their media.
Well, so I'm going to challenge you on a couple things here, Eric.
Yeah.
Number one, I think we're already in a new normal. Everybody does what our new normal is going to look like. I think we're there. I don't see this type of situation evolving much further than it is. I think you have some areas that are a little bit more locked down right now because we have a spike and everything else, but it'll eventually, get done. But I don't think that's what's going to change people's directions. I mean, do you know how long it takes to change a habit?
I think it's like at least 6 weeks of doing it every day or something like that, or 60 days. I forget. Yeah.
21 days, 23 days. Sorry, 23 days of consistent behavior will change your habits. So
not long.
we're there times 10. I mean, we're a year and a half into this, and there's really not, with the vaccination politics outside of this, what we're looking at is it's not getting under control for various reasons. And so this isn't going to just dissipate and go away. This is something that's going to be here for quite some time. So as marketers, we can't sit here and look at it and go, oh, you know what? Well, in the new normal, we'll wait and do this when this is the new normal. We don't have that luxury. We need to be adjusting to today, paying attention and have the foresight for tomorrow, but also making sure that we're on top of the situation today, and making sure that we understand what all is taking place. And what we're seeing is a complete shift in viewing habits. And you can look at these numbers and say, wow, these TV networks, they're up. But if you look past the numbers, you'll see what the story is actually telling you. Local news is down. Okay. Network news, your cable network news are up. So what does that tell you? Less and less people are interested about local reporting, and these national news outlets have gone less about factual reporting and more about opinion-based reporting. And so people are becoming more opinion focused on this, and they're looking to this as more of a driving force of entertainment / news kind of direction. And so you got to look at it and you go, okay, how do we market to this? Because the gathering of this information is different. Now, I will say, having said that, your local news is just as viable and as important as it ever has been before. And that's why local news advertising has increased exponentially, because your local based news is also streaming on your OTT, your streaming devices. So your cord cutters and everything else, those are going OTT. So you're producing advertising content, targeted advertising content to people who are looking for this through a digital means. So yeah, going to your local television station and buying local TV is one thing, especially when people go, oh, well, everybody's cutting the cord and not so many people have satellite anymore or cable anymore. Well, that argument is actually a moot point, because this advertising on these local stations is going digital. That's where it is more so than it was before. Okay, I'll shut up now.
I convinced my parents last year to switch from cable to YouTube TV, and they're like, yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, they cut the cord, but they're still getting cable channels and they're still getting their local TV and they're still watching, NCIS every Tuesday or whatever. But it's just now, instead of doing it through this cable service, they're doing it through, YouTube. So
Yeah. And it's interesting, Trace, to that point, my dad and mom called me 2 days ago and said, hey, Texas Tech football and baseball and basketball and all that stuff's not really playing on the big networks. It's all on ESPN Plus. So can you get us signed up for that Hulu and ESPN Plus and the Disney Channel Plus bundle? And I'm like, yeah. And then they looked at it. They were paying over $250 a month for cable and internet.
Yeah, and that bundle's like $15 or something like that.
Yeah. So I'm going, yeah, I can do that. And the request from my dad was make sure ESPN Plus is on there so I can watch Texas Tech football. But then my mom's was make sure there's the Hallmark channels, all 3 of them on there. So, in that case, then we're looking at Fubo TV because.
Well, my mom had the same thing. She's like, where's my Hallmark channels? And I was like, well, you're paying so much less. We can just pay $5 a month during the holidays. So that's when she mostly watches it.
Don't do that.
Really?
Don't do that. Nope. We did that last year. The app only plays X amount of old Hallmark movies, and it didn't really play the new ones, and it didn't have all the good ones. It just had a select few that went in there. So my wife was pretty disappointed when she opened that app up, and she's like, excuse me, where's the Christmas Wish, and where's, and started naming off all these Hallmark movies, and I'm going, sorry.
Yeah, no, I remember it was the same thing, as my parents. I think they still have cable, but they're slowly getting out of it to now where once my mom realized that there's like a dedicated Bravo, like Roku app, man, all bets are off on what's happening. It's Below Deck and Real Housewives 24/7.
But yeah, so, there's the streaming's really, it's taking a direction of viewing habits, but it's not really having that significant of an impact on the advertising habits. And, one of the coolest things that I found in this article, like I kind of, you guys know me, I kind of nerd out on some of this stuff sometimes when I have the time to dive into it. And it was really interesting to me when I looked at the overall advertising dollars spent on political last year. And it really it breaks it down. If you start thinking about where they're advertising and what they advertise on, it's a real telling sign. But it also shows you how manipulated these numbers can be. For example, in last year's election, there was just over $2 billion spent on political ads. In
and that's just for local TV stations, right?
This is just no, this is across the board.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then in 2018, there was $1.2 billion spent. So we had an increase of $800 million in the last political campaign. In the 2016 campaign, $843 million was spent total. So you can see how these advertising dollars are shooting up, and it's putting some massive pressure on these analytics and these graphs. So you got to look at that and you got to go, okay, wait a second. Yes, ad revenue was up last year over the year before, and it shows a trend of forward moving in this one direction. But then you got to look at it and go, hey, $2 billion of that $13 billion was actually political ads. So how much is it really progressing versus not?
Yeah. Very interesting. It is, the way you can kind of skew your data to tell any story that you want is always very interesting, and now we're seeing year over year.
Actually, you know what, Eric, you were right. That was local television companies.
Okay, I thought
That
so, but
that was spent at the local level. Yeah, so
it's
$2 billion.
it's unbelievable to see just year over year the increase. You look at these graphs, and I'll put this in the comments of the live feed for anybody that wants to look along with it. But it's
And I'll
basically
tell
a
you,
perfect function. It's going up year over year, increasing
it is.
consistently.
And I'll tell you, when I worked at the TV stations, I remember the last political campaign I was there, and I think I left right before the last political window in a presidential campaign was there. But we were all excited because that year we'd gotten a little over 1.2 million in political ad spend.
Mm-hmm.
And
Shows
so,
you how it's increased.
I know. So, but and you are seeing things in this research about radio. I mean, Trace brought radio up a few minutes ago, and yes, terrestrial is falling off, and streaming and I almost said Shopify, Spotify and Pandora are doing it, and then now you got your podcasts in there that are killing it too. So NPR giving was up.
Yeah, we're seeing Spotify take an interesting approach to kind of streaming media. In the past, streaming platforms, before kind of Spotify took over the market, you could look at like a SoundCloud or a Mixcloud, and those were primarily driven by artists uploading their own work for others to listen to. Whereas that does exist for platforms like Spotify, but they're such a large brand now. They're actively going out and purchasing exclusive partnerships with podcasts, just like a television, station would do with a high quality TV show. So we're seeing people like Joe Rogan, Last Podcast Network, as well as some of the New York Times podcasts are all Spotify exclusives. And it's interesting to me. I listen to a ton of podcasts, and I'm sure y'all do too, but even with a premium membership, I get served ads in the middle of my podcast, and I can skip through them. But if I'm like driving or something, I normally don't. And it's kind of funny to think about that, like, wow, I paid for a premium membership and now I'm getting served ads on top of it. And I'm really not even complaining about it.
Well, and I know some podcasts, they changed over the pandemic too, because the ones, there's a lot of podcasts like once a week, twice a week, and most of those were doing fine when it was coming to advertising. But any ones that were doing daily or like 4 to 5 times a day or a week podcasts, they were really losing revenues. So a lot of them moved to Patreon or moved to subscription for those. And so like there's one sports one I listen to where they do one weekly free with ads, and then everything else you have to be a subscriber to listen to the rest of it. And every once in a while they'll throw in like a 1 week, they'll be like, oh, here's a bonus Patreon episode, with ads. So, try to keep you to sign up. But even there, like they're moving to subscription, a lot of those.
Geez, Eric, that's where we went wrong with our podcast. We should have gone Patreon.
All 6 of our listeners would have had to subscribe, and it would have really been difficult.
At that point, we should have just asked our parents for them to donate money to us, because that's who was listening.
I know, exactly. It was a family affair, though. But man, every time my mom called me, she told me what a good job I was doing. So it was worth it in the long run. It is. It is. It's interesting when clients kind of come to us and they say like, I don't know where to start. Traditionally I would think of running a television or a radio commercial of some kind. And then for us to kind of turn around and open them to this whole new world of where traditional is now blurring in with digital, it's like, what real difference is there between serving a spot on terrestrial radio and Spotify at this point? Until it's actually put out to the public, the processes are pretty similar. We upload the content, we pay the money, and select some parameters, and there it goes.
Here's where the line gets a little blurred, though, and that is credibility and believability. But it's getting blurred because you're having so many networks now really get hit up with, and everything. Social media has really swamped this with disinformation and everything else. And whether you like that term or not, it is something that absolutely everybody now sits there and goes, any type of media that they digest, they have to sit there and look at it and go, is this real? Like, I almost need to see the sources in order for me to understand that this is something that's factual, because we've had too many problems with disinformation or and I say this all the time, but I think people really do need to go out and watch The Great Hack on Netflix about how this company, Cambridge Analytica, would sway campaigns based on disinformation, based on data points. They had over 5,000 data points per person, and they had 30,000 profiles that they gave to these campaigns for them to be able to market to and everything else. It has created a mistrust and a distrust in our viewing habits now. And so I've given up on watching news. I don't watch it anymore. I read some articles and everything else. But number one, I'm already depressed enough. I don't need to pile it on. And number two, I can't trust it. It's all too opinion based for me to sit there and really regurgitate any of that information into a factual conversation with somebody. And so, to me, that's part of the problem. And that's one of the biggest issues that these networks have to figure out, because it doesn't matter if you're getting it from a subscription base, or if you're buying the app, or if you're doing it through cable or Fubo TV or anything else, you're still going to run into the problem of you're trying to sell ad time and people don't want it, number one. And number two, your viewership is continuously shifting and moving. We watched a really good conversation in our AE meeting yesterday with Bob Iger, who is the CEO of Disney. And it was about disruption. And he talked about acknowledging disruption and then embracing disruption and going with it.
I think you sent that to me. I think I saw that.
Yeah, with
it's
the
good.
ESPN Plus and the Disney Plus, and they didn't sit back and just let the changes of the industry affect them. They drove the change itself so that they could be relevant. And I think that's where a lot of industries are struggling. The newspaper industry, like you were talking about earlier, they're behind the eight ball. They're toast because they didn't evolve fast enough. Radio ignored online streaming and they didn't evolve fast enough, and look where they're going now. TV, they embraced the change a little bit more. They really took to the changing viewing habits, and they're evolving with it, and they're trying their best to stay relevant, and they are, but not quite as strong as original content on YouTube or something like that. But and what's telling to me, looking at this from an entertainment standpoint, is I find it ironic that there are shows that the broadcast companies are producing and they're failing. And they're not getting the viewers, and they're dying. But then Netflix comes in and picks them up, and then all of a sudden they got a massively successful show. Manifest is a great example of that. 2 seasons of just failure on NBC, and then all of a sudden Netflix puts it on their streaming platform, and all of a sudden it becomes one of the top 10 streaming shows in America. And then all of a sudden NBC goes, well, we're not going to produce it anymore, and there's an outcry. And then all of a sudden there's so many people interested in this now that Netflix and NBC come together to produce more shows to go on Netflix. So you got to look at that and go, okay, well, if that's the case and that's your NBC network and it's not able to make successful shows on its platform, is it really relative?
Yeah. There's a
Okay, I'll
lot.
stop talking now.
But I mean, you brought up good points where we're starting to see like which industries are able to make that jump. And, we're starting to see it with the film industry right now. During the pandemic when theaters closed, Disney specifically, and then later, Paramount, and now we're seeing same day releases with HBO Max. But the movie industry said, okay, maybe people don't want to go to the theaters anymore. And Disney gave it a shot, and they put Mulan, I think, for $29.99 up. And that seems like a ton of money to rent a movie. But the way they explained it was that's less than what you would pay to go to the theater with even two people. So, okay, you got me there. And
I will buy
it was
Mulan.
successful.
Yeah, I'll do that if they'll send me some movie theater popcorn with it.
Exactly, right? It's hard to get that butter that comes out of the machine. Yeah,
I
but
know.
it's incredible. We saw that, and then like what you were saying with the disinformation stuff, I'm starting to kind of learn more and more. I'm doing my master's in international relations now at a snail's pace, but with every class I take, I kind of get a better understanding of kind of some of the conflicts that are being reported on now. And I'm starting to see, no matter whether it's left or right, it's like they don't, news media, TV media, or video based, just not print journalism, they have the incredibly difficult task of trying to hold their viewers base, which is going to sway in one direction, whether it's conservative or liberal, and then B, it's to actually report what's happening. And what I found is it's just missing so much context because they don't have the ability to truly accurately report. It's like I get in conversations with people saying, oh, I want to hear your thoughts about Afghanistan, and I sound like a kind of a mean standoffish guy when I'm just like, I don't want to talk about it. It's just too complex. But it's like, it's hard, it's hard when you see that there is so much to these stories that the average public really isn't getting, just because what they're absorbing in news media isn't about education anymore. It's about retaining that viewer base.
Yeah, I think you get like 6 minutes like for each topic, maybe if you're lucky. And and then with local media, it's even less. Like I remember when I was first taking like local broadcasting classes at South Plains College, it was like, yeah, we need you to like put, the story needs to be like a minute long. It's like, how are you really telling too much of a story in that time?
Yeah, having worked inside a network that has a local broadcast of news, and two of them at that, it's really interesting how they format and the methodology behind the formatting of their stories. When I was there, and it's changed since I was there, but when I was there, it was, this network is going to do longer stories, more in depth, because that's what these people want to see. This network is going to do very quick hits and then push them to the website if they want to learn more, or tune in at a later date to follow up on a more in-depth story. But it's almost a science, to be honest with you, when you watch them format all of this stuff. It's really kind of cool.
I can only imagine, honestly. There has to be so many considerations, the average person doesn't really think of. And, so much of it is being able to be built around advertisers too. When we see people get mad at some news presenter, what's the first thing that happens online? It's a call to boycott those shows. We've seen some people on Fox News get in trouble and lose some advertisers who will refuse to now put stuff on their programs. So it's interesting to kind of see the balance that a media company has to run of, it can be not necessarily factually based and be more opinion based, but there will be consequences if you sway too far outside of kind of the norm. Or at least, in theory, there would be. It doesn't seem like their viewership's being impacted negatively in any way.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna say this real quick, and then I got to go because I got to pick the little one up today.
Yeah.
But one of the things to take into consideration too is the cost of advertising in each one of these things. Because, and I'm just going to throw round numbers out. We work in a lot of markets, so this isn't representative of any network. Okay.
Disclaimer.
But, on average, for 10p news, you're looking at $450 for one spot. Okay. So you're talking about taking budget, and we have a certain budget to work with. You're talking about taking a portion of that budget and applying it to something that is losing credibility or losing viewership and everything else, but it has a different type of value to it. But here's the thing, I can go into this local channel and I can pay $450 for one commercial. Well, now you and I both know one commercial isn't going to do it. You have to buy several of them at a consistent strategy in order for it to have an impact. And then you're talking about a month, 2 months, even 3 months before you see the results of that impact. So you're allocating a pretty significant piece of budget to something that is in the numbers, looks decent, but when you break the numbers down, you kind of go, Now, I say that there's still a lot of value in news. And if you have the budget available to do news, it is absolutely a great place to go. But the flip side of that is I can take that same budget and I can go over into an OTT situation, and I can buy OTT, which is network television, and it will go into more profile and more specific targeting than just broad-based broadcasting. And so I can actually go in and go, I want guys that do this. I want men of this age. I want women of this age. I want nobody under the age of 18, those types of things. You can set parameters in OTT.
Yeah.
But the difference is when you're buying OTT, you're buying thousands, cost per thousands, versus the cost broadcast of you're hitting anybody and everybody who happens to tune in at that time. So it's a little bit more concentrated. It's a little bit more direct. And you're going to lose coverage. So you're not buying, when you buy the news, you're buying reach. When you buy OTT, you're buying frequency. Okay. You want to balance both. You want a good reach and a good frequency, but sometimes you have to choose one over the other. Now, there are OTT platforms out there where you can go in and you can upload several different commercials to it. And based off of who is watching what program, it will play that ad. So, for example, if you're Bic razors and you go in and you have a commercial for women and you have a commercial for men, based on that program, OTT will go, hey, more than likely this is a woman that's watching this, so we're going to do this pink razor. And more than likely, this is a football game. And this is under the profile of this guy, so we're going to show him a blue razor and talk about the differences between, shaving a face and shaving the legs. So OTT gives you a little bit more specific targeting with that. And I should say that was pretty wrong of me to say NFL football, because almost 50% of all football viewers are women. So that was a bad example. So, so that's kind of my point is, there's pros and cons to each. What are you willing to give up? How are you managing that budget? How are you allocating the resources? Because then you also have production costs that go into this as well. So,
it makes sense.
I'm going to head out so that he's not waiting on me.
Sounds good. Thanks for stopping in, Brian.
No problem. Talk to you guys later. Bye, Trace.
Bye.
But yeah, it's interesting kind of in terms of what he was saying, where it's like, you have a shotgun blast or a sniper rifle, and, both tools are useful in their own right. But let's talk about the big piece of this where we're seeing still, total advertising revenue, just like year over year. It decreased like a little bit in 2020 to only just under 250 billion, but
just under 250 billion.
Yeah, right. Just below. Just a few billion off. But it's crazy to see that digital, I think it was 2018 or 2019 when we first saw total digital advertising costs overtake traditional or non-digital advertising. And that trend's only increasing and only strengthening. What do you think is going to happen kind of as we move forward? Do you think it's eventually just going to eat it entirely, or will there still be, some type of place for non-digital stuff besides just like billboards?
Yeah. I'm sure there's still going to be a space for it. I'm not the best person to ask, because I'm like, let's just get rid, let's just move into the digital space. Why are we playing games right now?
Yeah.
But so I'm not really. I'm the kind of person who thinks that we should have nationally provided fiber. So
yeah,
everywhere. So I'm probably not, again, the person to talk. But I do think there's space for traditional, at least for a few more. At least for maybe another. Because we still have a generation who, we talked about my parents, and Brian talked about his parents, kind of cutting the cord. But that's still, I still don't think that's the norm yet. And so there are still people to be reached there. And those are still people, I mean, the baby boomers and Generation X, they have the most income right now. And so they have the most, what's it called? Discretionary income, is that what it's called? Or,
yeah.
And so that's who we're going to be wanting to advertise to a lot, depending on what it is. And so I do think right now there's still a place, but I'm sure just like anything else, we kind of talked about it. I don't know if it was on here and a meeting, it all runs together, but we were recently talking about how eventually, when something becomes obsolete, you can sit here and keep trying to hold on to it, but typically you just got to cut it off and move on. And that might happen with some of these traditional, newspaper. It's been 15 years maybe, of them just slowly grasping and trying to stick around. And I love newspaper. I love magazines. I mean, I do photography. I love shooting for magazines. It's my favorite thing to shoot for. I still get excited when, a photo is published in a magazine.
Oh yeah.
But if they're not useful to, then why are we still having them? And I think magazines actually can stick around, because something with a niche audience like that. That I think that's where you're going to find things. And even like news, I think news is probably going to get more specialized.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Things like that. I think it's just going to get narrower and narrower. And I mean, it's kind of like how we still have records, but it's more of a niche thing for specific people who like to collect records. But most people are streaming their music at this point. So that's kind of where I see it going.
You bring up a good point about like the specialization of media channels too now, which is something that just didn't exist in the past, when you would have your 3, 6, and 10, or even just 2000, television stations. They still weren't as niche as what we're seeing now being produced on YouTube or even in media and reporting. I personally read for most of my news a site called Axios, which is basically, a pretty middle of the line outlet that kind of works on presenting information in a very condensed, almost tweet like fashion. So it's kind of like a quick hit where you get the high level concepts. But I see them branching off into almost like dozens of specialized things, whether it's by market. So you have like Axios Denver or Axios St. Paul, or by industry. I follow Axios Gaming now, and it's interesting to me that those are all separate entities. Yes, they're underneath an umbrella for sure, but they don't cross paths at all. It's like I'm never going to accidentally find some of the gaming news on the main Axios website that's reporting on international policy. So it's fascinating to see, as that specialization kind of keeps taking place, what that means for us, because we can kind of tie it back into the conversation we were having a few weeks ago about how, as cookies start to disappear, everybody is saying, how do we reach these people that we need to reach? And it's by finding what they're watching and advertising on those platforms rather than anything else.
That's kind of the pros and cons of it. I mean, the con is you can create, at least within political and news, you can, if everyone starts picking the specialized things that they like, you create an echo chamber, and you're just listening, which is already happening. People are following the Facebook groups, people are following the people on Twitter, they're watching the news station, they're already doing it. It's just going to get more and more extreme. But on the positive end, as far as like advertisers and stuff, we can really specialize who, like, if we know this product is going to really be, I don't know, for some reason, like horror junkies are going to like it, we can find people who are subscribers to Shudder, which is, you know, a horror streaming service, or, you know, we can
That's
really start
is that Robert Rodriguez's one?
I don't know who. Oh, I don't know. I have it right now because it's connected with the
Yeah.
with the AMC.
I've heard about it.
Yeah, I have the AMC subscriptions, and it's like connected in there. But you can really, like, you can start like really targeting. The more and more specialized it all becomes, the more you can be like, we really want this specific audience to see it, and that audience we're gonna be able to find them. So in that way, it's great. When it comes to the mass advertising, you know, that's where it's going to be a little more difficult. It has been more difficult for a while now.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, good conversation today. I think, you know, there's endless amounts that we could talk about in terms of what it's going to look like in media trends moving forward. But I think if 2020, but really the last couple of years, ever since Harambe got shot, has taught us anything, it's that we have no idea what is coming next. So we can try our absolute best to figure out what it might be, but it'll always be interesting to see where the trends ultimately lie. But yeah, let's wrap up for this week. Any closing thoughts on your end?
No, you know, just enjoy the conversation. I'm glad I'm in my new place, so I don't have those gross like purple walls behind me. I got like white. Soon I'll have the decor hanging up. So
nice and clean.
Yeah, it's gonna be nice. But yeah, definitely in the new place and feeling good. But as far as the conversation, yeah, I think it went good. Great. I always love Brian's takes. He's always coming in with great stuff.
Absolutely. It's always great to have him on to speak with us. Well, all righty. We will be back on next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time to discuss that week's happenings in advertising. Until then, everybody enjoy the rest of your week.